Alright, so we're talking about exponents again. We're going to talk about exponents, pretty much evaluating exponents today. In this video, shorter video, the previous video talked about exponents and just kind of terminology. So today's video talks about just exponents and evaluating. So here's our beginning chapter. We went through this already in the previous video. We're going to evaluate. If we're going to evaluate means we're gonna find a value. Sorry, it's kind of sloppy. We're gonna evaluate, find that value of an exponential expression. An expression, remember, is just something without an equal sign. An equation, maybe without an equal sign, it's just one half of that equation. So an expression could be a couple of terms together, or it could be just one term. Essentially, when we evaluate, we're going to multiply the base by itself as many times as the exponent on the base indicates. So in other words, we have a base. Remember, we've got a base and we've got exponents. So here's our base. Base is 2 right there. And our exponent is 5. So if we're going to evaluate 2 to the 5th power, that's an exponential. We don't know what the value is. So if we're going to evaluate that, we just simply write out longhand what this means. What does that mean? Well, its base is 2, so I'm multiplying 2 by itself 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. Times another 2 is 16, times another 2, 32. So if we're going to evaluate 2 to the 5th power, it's 32. We're just multiplying out. Multiply the base by itself 5 times because that's what the exponent indicates. So it's always important to know what the base is. What's the base and what's the exponent? Because they always work as a pair. It's kind of an old married couple. They always go together. The base and the exponent always go together. That exponent always works on the base. The base is dependent on the exponent to kind of tell us how we evaluate. So they all go together. Here's my base of -4. It's squared, so if I'm going to write this out longhand or evaluate it, that's what I'd have to do is write it out longhand. -4 times -4. Negative times negative is positive. I'm going to write it as a positive. Usually we don't write that positive sign right there because if it's a term here that's positive, we usually don't write that positive sign, but we'll write it out right now just to make sure that we understand that negative times negative is positive. 4 times 4 is 16. Positive 16 is our evaluation of -4 squared. All right, now I put this over here and I put this here because they look real similar, but the evaluation comes out a little bit different. Let's take a look at this, -4 squared. A little bit different from this because the negative is inside the parentheses here. That means my base is -4. My base is -4. My base is -4. Multiply by itself twice. I get a positive 16. Over here, the negative sign is outside of the base. We could consider this -1 times 4 squared because that negative sign is outside the 4 squared. The 2x only on the 4. So here, my base is just positive 4. So this is again -1 times my base is 4 multiplied by itself twice because we've got a squared term. -1 times 4 is -16. A little bit different. We can consider this as a string of maybe x minus 4 squared, something like that. This -4 squared is what we evaluate right here. So if this were in or part of an expression that were bigger, including two terms maybe, the x and the -4 squared, the x would be still here, and the -4 squared would be -16. It would not turn into a positive 16. So that's a little bit different. This -4 squared in green, a little bit different from the -4 as a base squared. Keep that in mind. All right, so let's evaluate these guys down here. We can multiply an exponential term by an exponential term, and keep in mind we've got a negative sign here, we've got a positive sign here on the 2. So what does this mean? Well, let's see. Here's my -3 squared means my base is -3, -3 times -3, and I'm multiplying by itself twice because my exponent is 2. All right, let's take a look at what the next term is. We're going to be multiplying by, that little dot means multiply by 2 cubed. Base is 2 to the cubed power to the 3rd power means I'm multiplying 2, my base, by itself 3 times. It's hard to write sometimes when you're talking at the same time. So now here's our longhand description. Negative 3 squared, negative 3 times negative 3. 2 cubed is 2 times 2 times 2. And now all we do now is just evaluate this. Let's evaluate the signs first. Negative times a negative times a positive times a negative, I guess we'll start with that. Negative times a negative is a positive. Times a positive, times a positive, times a positive gives us an answer of positive. 3 times 3 is 9. Now we take a look at the numbers, because if we take a look at signs first, then numbers next, we can kind of separate and conquer. 3 times 3 is 9, times 2, 18, times 2, 36, times 2, 72. Did that in my head? I hope it's correct. I think it is. And there's my answer. Negative 3 squared times 2 cubed is, well, let's see, remember the 2 over here as an exponent works on the negative 3. 3 over here as an exponent works on the 2 of a base. So we kind of break it apart and write it all down, and there's our evaluation of negative 3 squared times 2 cubed. If we evaluate these as well, let's see, you know what? I'm going to put these onto the next video. We're going to evaluate these.